If you are watching this, then I am assuming that you have already watched the 9.1 video that stops after the first 6 graphs. There are 2 other graphs that I said that we would talk about in class, and we're going to go ahead and do that now so that you have that understanding. In this case, I want you to be aware that when we're talking about graphs, we're talking about the trinomial where A is the coefficient with my x squared, B is my coefficient with my x, and C is my constant. We're going to use those, and I know that this isn't in your notes, but it may be something that you want to write down, because what we've been graphing is called a parabola. And so on your graph, sometimes the parabola does not line up with the y-axis. And so the y-axis, what all the graphs we have been doing is your axis of symmetry, symmetry being the line where you could cut it in half. And sometimes this yellow line right here becomes the axis of symmetry, or sometimes we call it the AOS. And that is called the axis of symmetry because it cuts the parabola in half. In order to find the axis of symmetry when it is a trinomial, what we're going to work with is this formula right here, negative b over 2a. We're also going to look at the vertex, which is the point where it crosses the y-axis. So there is a point where your parabola will cross that y-axis. That's called the vertex. If you look at the formula, you don't necessarily need this because you'll find it, but it is 0, c, which is your third value in your equation. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a practice with this. Let's go ahead and find the axis of symmetry first. Now, I know axis of symmetry and your vertex are not listed for you to find, but go ahead and fill those out, write those in. And so your axis of symmetry is going to be the opposite of B, and so this is going to be your A right here. This is going to be your B, and this is going to be your C. So the axis of symmetry is the opposite of B over 2A, so that would be negative 4 over 2 times, in this case, 1. So negative 4 over 2 equals a negative 2. That means I'm going to go to my negative 2 on my x-axis, and that's going to be my axis of symmetry. So this is the place where I could fold my parabola in half, and that's where it gets divided. My vertex, remember we said, was your 0, c. So if I use my 0c, that would be 0, 7. So I go over 0 up 7, and go ahead and plot that point right there. And if we know anything about graphing parabolas, one side is going to be the same as the other side. So I know that that other side is going to look like a 7 right there. Okay, the other way we can do this is by setting up a table. So since negative 2 is my axis of symmetry, that's going to be my number that I want to use to go in the middle. So I'm going to do negative 2 in the middle. I'm going to do 2 above and 2 below. So negative 1 and 0, and then I'm going to do negative 3 and negative 4. And this is going to be the case because when I plug it into my equation, then I'm going to be able to work it out and still have negative 2 be my lowest or highest point. So I've got negative 2 squared, which is 4, plus 4 times negative 2, which is a negative 8, plus 7. So 4 plus a negative 8 is a negative 4, plus 7 is going to give me 3. So on my graph, I'm going to go negative 2 up 3. Then I'm going to do the above and below. So I'll go ahead and go to negative 1. And negative 1 squared is 1, plus negative 4 times negative 1 is going to be a negative 4, and plus 7. So 1 minus 4 is a negative 3, plus 7 is going to be 4. So I have a negative 1 up 4. Now you'll see that this is the reason why I don't technically need my vertex, because I can just plug it in. So if I plug in 0, I get 0 squared is 0, plus 4 times 0 is plus 0, and plus 7 is going to be 0, 7, which I already have plotted. It's a good habit to get into just to check, just to make sure that you don't have to put all of your numbers in, but you want to make sure that you are on the right track. So negative 3 squared would be 9, and 4 times a negative 3 is a negative 12 plus 7, Well, 9 minus 12 is going to give me a negative 3, plus 7 is also going to give me 4. So that would be negative 3, 4 would be my ordered pair. And you do see that those are symmetrical against the axis of symmetry. And if I plug in my negative 4, that would be a 16 minus 16, which plus 7 does equal 7, because 16 minus 16 is 0, plus 7, which equals 7. So I can go ahead and graph my parabola from here because I now know that I have all of my information that I need. I've got my 5 points. And let's go back down and we'll talk about the domain and the range. If you remember before, the domain is all of my x values that I can plug in. And in this case, I could plug in anything. So again, it's going to be your all reals or infinite solution. And then your range is going to be what you get, what is the output or the y values. And in this case, it's starting at 3. So y is going to be everything greater than or equal to 3, because 3 is my lowest number that I'm working with here. So if we move on to the next equation, we're going to do the same thing. We're still going to do my A, my B, and my C. And remember, my axis of symmetry is the opposite of B, which would be a positive 6, over 2A. So 2 times 3, which is 6 over 6, and equals 1. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to plot a line for my axis of symmetry at 1. And I'm going to find my vertex, which is an easy one to find. I'm going to know that that is going to be 0C, which is 0, 2. So that's going to be one of my points over 0 up 2. And I know that that's going to be where it's going to cross the axis. So if I want to do the same thing on the opposite side, that's going to go right there. Let's go ahead and make our table. And my axis of symmetry is 1, so that's going to go my middle number. And I'm going to do 2 above, 2 below, so negative 1 and 0, and then 2 and 3. I personally like to start with the middle number just because I like that to be my minimum or maximum, depending on whatever it is. So I'm going to start with 1, plug that in. 1 squared is 1, times 3 just gives me 3, minus 6 times 1, which is 6, plus 2. Well, 3 minus 6 is going to give me negative 3, plus 2 is going to be a negative 1. So I'm going to do over 1, down 1, and then I'm going to move on to the other ones as well. So 0, I know that's going to be my 0, 0, and 2. So everything's going to be, that's going to be my 2, which is already graphed for me. If I do my 2, that would be 2 squared, which is 4. So 3 times 4 is 12, minus 6 times 2, which is 12, plus 2. So that's also going to be 2. And then my third point, which will be the same, I prefer to use my positive, so let's work with there. So 3 squared is 9 times 3 is going to be 27. And that's going to be minus 6 times 3, which is 18, plus 2. I can write here. So then 27 minus 18 is going to be 9, plus 2 is going to be 11, and let's just double check that top one to make sure it's the same. It should be 11 as well. So negative 1 squared is 1, so 3 times 1 is 3. Negative 1 times a negative 6 is a positive 6, and plus 2. That would be 3 plus 6 is 9, plus 2 is indeed 11. And that should probably go off of your graph. Negative 1, 11, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's going to go off of my graph. And it's going to be symmetrical on the same side. Go ahead and plot your parabola. Ooh, this one's a little off. And we're going to move down to the domain and range. My domain in this case is always going to be your all reals. And And moving down, my range in this case is going to be y is everything greater than or equal to -1, because that is the lowest point. So it's always got to be above that. Okay, when you come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about that vertex and the axis of symmetry and graphing and moving on from there.